Hello world, this is CS50. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes? Well, welcome to the CS50x Educator Workshop. This is a now annual tradition of ours via which we bring together educators from around the world, such as yourselves, to talk about how you might adopt or adapt CS50 or any of CS50's courses, and also ultimately to create a community of teachers so that whether you're teaching here in the US or anywhere abroad, even if you're the only computer science teacher in your school or your community or the like, you nonetheless have a whole community of teachers as well as classmates around the world. So for those of you less familiar with Zoom, allow me to draw your attention to just a few features. Probably along the bottom of your window, you should see a button that's called Participants or something else in your own language. If you click on Participants, that should open a side window that will show you everyone else here who's in the room at this moment. And if you look along the bottom too, you should see a chat button. And if you click on the chat button, a chat window should appear below that participants window where you can chat with fellow participants. Now, I won't be able to really keep a good eye on the chat window today, but I'll do my best with Brian to see if we can field any questions that come there. But we'll have opportunities for questions and answers throughout this session and others by way of another feature of Zoom, namely raising a blue digital hand. So if you look at the participants window, you should see a blue button that looks a little like this. If everyone wouldn't mind trying to click that to raise your hand virtually. You should see below the participants window a blue hand. That'll be the visual cue to me and to Brian and to CS50's team here that you have a question, and we will do our best to answer. Please do forgive. We have a lot of people in the room, and we won't necessarily be able to take all questions live, but we'll provide you with contact information via email and the like, via which you can follow up with questions as well. And because there are so many people in the room, we're going to keep everyone muted by default. But if I'm able to call on you for a question or an answer from you, we will display a pop-up on your screen that will allow you to unmute yourself, and will spotlight you for everyone to see. So allow me to show you some of the teachers and students past who have come through this space and virtually through CS50. CS50 is as much a community as it is a course. And indeed, these are just a few photographs that have been shared with some of our teachers around the world. Here are some of our students in Miami-Dade College proudly displaying their CS50 certificates at the end of the course. Some of our students and teachers here in Chile, here in London, here in Burma, here in Bolivia, here in Nicaragua, here in Congo, here in Pakistan, here in Egypt, here in Ukraine, here in India, and in so many other locations around the world. Indeed, in this session, we'll spend some time focusing not only on CS50, the curriculum, but also CS50, the community. And in fact, now that we've put everyone's hands down temporarily, might one or more of you be comfortable unmuting yourself in just a moment and saying hello and where you're from and what you teach if you've taught before? Would anyone like to raise their blue hand and say hello to the world here? Any blue hands? Let's see, Allison. Can we call on you first? Allison, to say where in the world you are and what you teach, and a hello to all of the other teachers here.
Hi, I'm from Florida, and I teach 8th grade IB science. And I'm going to be teaching computer science this year. This is the first year our school has offered computer science.
Wonderful. Well, so glad you've joined us. And indeed, per that first photo, we've had this wonderful collaboration with some of our students and teachers in Miami-Dade, and in turn, some of the nearby high schools as well. So welcome. Let's go to someone else now. Could we go to, say, John, if you'd like to say hello and where you're from and what you teach?
Hi, I'm John from New York. I work for the federal government, and I'm interested in bringing CS50 inside. So hopefully this will be a great experience. I personally greatly enjoyed CS50 myself, and I think it can be a great tool for expanding computer science in the government.
Wonderful. So glad to have you with us as well. Welcome. How about one or two final hellos here? Can we go to Augustine? Augustine, if you would like to say hello and where you're from and what you teach. And I hope I'm pronouncing your name right.
Yeah, you're pronouncing it right. I'm Agustin Covarrubias. I'm from Santiago, Chile. I'm an undergraduate student that is trying to teach computer science to other students, and also take my university to modernize their CS courses.
Oh, that's great. So glad to have you as well. The photograph I showed briefly earlier from London was actually from a student group there that was indeed teaching CS50 to some of their classmates. And lastly, can we say a quick hello to Islam? If you'd like to say hello, where you're from and what you teach.
Hello, David. I'm Islam from Egypt.
Nice to meet you. And what do you teach now, or what are you considering teaching?
And I consider teaching CS50 in my organization, ITI, Information
Wonderful.
Technology Institute in Egypt.
So glad to have you with us as well. Well, allow me to give you all a taste of what we'll be doing today and in turn over the coming days too. Here is a look at the schedule. We'll begin today with the session on teaching CS50x itself, providing you with an overview of curricular resources. This will be followed tomorrow and the next day and into next week with sessions on CS50's tools for submitting and grading, and also what they are and how to use them. We'll focus in particular on grading assignments and handling issues of academic honesty, taking a look again at some of the tools we provide and workflows that teachers have found helpful in their own classrooms to use, if not some of CS50's own tools. We'll focus on writing assessments too. In addition to the problem sets and quizzes and tests that CS50 itself provides, a lot of teachers, particularly those at the high school or middle school level that meet with their students more frequently than university classrooms might, like to write some of their own assessments, whether it's homework or quizzes or tests or problems, and we'll give you a sense of what you can do then. And then the following week, we'll focus not only on CS50, but on some of the precursor and follow-on courses that you can teach as well as take nowadays. The first being a trio of courses on computer science for business professionals, CS50 for lawyers, and understanding technology for anyone. And we'll introduce you to those curricula so that you can consider whether offering portions of those courses in your own classroom, offering the whole course itself before CS50 or to other audiences of students that might not want to take CS50x itself. And then in the days that follow, we'll introduce you by way of CS50's own Colton Ogden to CS50's introduction to game development using 2D and 3D games. We'll introduce you to CS50's own Brian Yu, and in turn, web programming with Python and JavaScript, as well as our most recent course from Brian, artificial intelligence. So that's all that lies ahead, but we thought we would begin today and see if we can't engender some of the community. On the screen here is a cohort of teachers that a few years ago were standing right here on this stage where I am when we used to hold this workshop in person in Cambridge as well as in other cities around the world. Right now, of course, circumstances don't allow, but we do hope that this finds you and your family and friends and colleagues quite well and healthy, albeit from afar. But we'd like you to have an opportunity to still meet some fellow educators today and the days to come. So in just a moment, you're going to see a prompt on your screen inviting you to a breakout group. What we're going to do is spend maybe 5 or so minutes breaking out into smaller groups, and allow me to invite you by way of your breakout group to say hello to your fellow teachers and answer 3 questions for each other. 1, who and where are you in the world? And in turn, what might you be teaching this coming year? 2, what are you excited about? And 3, what are you nervous about? Odds are if you're excited about something, so are other people. And odds are even more so if you're nervous about something, especially if you've never taught before or taught computer science before. Odds are you're nervous about something as well. And all the better if we can share those emotions swirling around in everyone's heads to reinforce the notion that indeed we're all in this together as one grander community. So in just a moment, you're about to see a prompt, and we will see you again in 5 minutes. But please consider turning on your video and microphones for these breakout groups to say hello to your group of teachers. See you in 5 minutes. All right, we are back. So hopefully you had an opportunity to connect with one or more teachers in your breakout room. Here on out, please feel free to use the chat window to communicate with each other, to share URLs of relevant resources or the like. You can also try using it for questions, and Brian will kindly keep an eye on it and see if he can't verbally relay some questions to me. But again, please forgive if we can't quite get to everything today. We'll provide you with contact information at the end of this session as well. The slides now that I'm using, in case I go too quickly on any of it, and so that you don't have to scribble everything down, Brian is going to go ahead and share the URL of those slides if you would like to follow along on your end. That way you can keep a copy. But allow me to forge ahead now with an overview of what CS50x is itself, with an overview of curricular resources so that you as a teacher can get a sense of what is available to you and how you might use it. At any point, if you have a question, please do feel free to raise your blue digital hand, and I'll do my best to call on folks as we go via those hands. All right, so without further ado, What is what? So odds are you've heard me and others say CS50 and CS50x. What do these two acronyms actually refer to? So CS50 is Harvard University's Introduction to the Intellectual Enterprises of Computer Science and the Art of Programming, an undergraduate class for majors and non-majors here at Harvard that takes place most every fall in this beautiful space here on campus. It happens to be Harvard's largest class with some 800 students here on campus. Each year we also have 200 to 300 students who are taking the course through Harvard's Division of Continuing Education or Extension School, either adults or younger students who are taking the course for their own edification or in pursuit of their own degree programs and certificates. And then we also have a cohort of some 200 to 300 students down the road in New Haven, Connecticut at a university called Yale, with whom we've been collaborating for some time. So CS50, beyond being this introduction to computer science, is also characterized by, I think, 3 principles to which we've adhered over the past many years. One, and first and foremost, is its accessibility. Even though CS50 at the end of the day is a good amount of work for most students as well as for most teachers, it really is designed to be accessible. And by accessible, we don't mean easy or light load, but rather a course that can be taken by students who have never programmed before and have never studied computer science before. It does, of course, have a decent slope such that if you're starting here with no prior background, some weeks later you do exit the course with a huge amount of background, but the onboarding for students is indeed meant to be accessible to anyone, whether or not they have studied computer science before. With that said, the course is characterized deliberately by its rigor, by its workload, by the challenge that is its problem sets or homework assignments. But the goal there is to ensure that students have an immersive, intensive, but hopefully rewarding experience by the end of the semester, so that either one, they can go off into their own fields, whether it's in the arts or humanities, social sciences or real world more general, and potentially never take formally another computer science course again, but still be able to successfully apply principles of computer science and programming to problems of interest to them. Alternatively, for students who want to go on and pursue additional studies in computer science and program more frequently, the course is also meant to provide students with a foundation in studies in computer science, particularly if they might want to go off and major in or pursue certificates in computer science as well. But ultimately, as mentioned, CS50 is as much a course as it is a community. And I dare say we focused fairly unusually, both here on campus and nowadays around the world, on truly building up a community of teachers and students alike. And that community is characterized by events, by certain cultural traditions, by certain rubber ducks even, and the like, so that students and teachers alike ultimately feel part of something special. They feel part of a collective shared experience and not, we hope, a more ordinary course, if you will. Now, what is CS50x? CS50x is the free OpenCourseWare version of that very same course. CS50 at Harvard is identical curricularly and technologically to CS50x. CS50x is simply what we call the free OpenCourseWare version that you can find here at this URL on Harvard's own website, as well as on edX and other platforms like YouTube, iTunes U, and the like. So what is included if you are a teacher considering adopting or adapting CS50x in some form by way of all of those OpenCourseWare materials? Well, allow us to break it down into 3 primary categories. The content that's available to you as a teacher, the software that's available to you as a teacher, and the events that are available to you as traditions as a teacher as well. And with all of these categories, realize that the goal is not for you as a teacher to simply take necessarily some course off the shelf and deliver it exactly as we do here, but rather, indeed, to adopt the class in that way or adapt the class in that way, doing what you feel is best for your own students, treating the course's materials really as a menu of possibilities that you can then incorporate into your own class, or you can use yourself as training for your own classroom environment. Indeed, many teachers who have never taught computer science, or for instance CS50 itself, have a wonderful resource in that you can take the course for free via OpenCourseWare or edX or the like. And just like here on campus, where we train our own teaching fellows or teaching assistants effectively by having them take the course before they then start to teach the course to their classmates, so can you as a teacher, especially if feeling very uncomfortable or completely uncomfortable right now, spend the coming months taking the class via OpenCourseWare or edX or the like, and that is hands down the best way to prepare yourself for teaching it in some form in your own class. So what then is included in the way of content? Well, generally speaking, we categorize the content along the lines of what we call lectures, which are more conceptually oriented talks given by me here in Sanders Theater on campus that we then film and make freely available online. Sections, which are small-scale classrooms led by our course's teaching fellows or teaching assistants, who themselves are usually students who have taken the course 1 or more years prior and are now sufficiently comfortable teaching it to peers or classmates of their own. We also make available what are called shorts, literally short videos that supplement these longer form lectures that focus on individual topics, led most recently by CS50's own Doug Lloyd. And then ultimately, what really characterizes students' experience in CS50 is its problem sets or homework assignments or really programming projects, each of which is generally accompanied by a so-called walkthrough, which is a video most recently led by CS50's own Brian Yu, which offers step-by-step instructions for just getting started with a problem and are designed to answer the frequently asked question, where do I even begin? So just as we use lectures to present concepts and we use sections to reinforce and explore concepts in more detail, walkthroughs are specifically focused on the problem sets themselves and helping students succeed in implementing those. And then we here on campus have what we call quizzes and a test each semester. The quizzes are meant to be opportunities not just to assess whether or not the student understands the material, but also opportunities to teach additional material beyond the course's own lecture. So for instance, here, typically at Harvard, we'll have lecture live in person on a Monday that we also then film, and we ask students to submit a quiz, 2 or 3 questions via a form online before their next class meeting, their so-called sections with the teaching fellows. So how might teachers be outside of Harvard use these same materials? They might have their students watch CS50's lecture online. Then they might assign 1 or more of these quizzes or tests at different points during the semester to, again, reinforce material, but also introduce new material as well. But toward the end of this session, we'll be focused on exactly how you can build your own blocks out of these various components. So what is covered in the way of lectures and sections in particular? Well, if you've taken CS50, odds are most of these concepts are already familiar to you. And if not, here's a high-level overview of what's covered in CS50 and in turn CS50x. We begin the semester with a look at Scratch, a graphical programming language where you program by dragging and dropping puzzle pieces, among the goals of which is to first introduce students to principles of procedural programming, so to speak, common programming paradigms, but also to give them an opportunity very early on to create something that's visual and audio that they can even share with their classmates or family or friends. We then follow that by an introduction to C, an older, more traditional text-based language on top of which many of today's languages are in effect built. And we introduce students thereafter to concepts like arrays. How can you begin to organize information inside of that computer? We focus on algorithms. How can you organize, search, and sort information via a computer efficiently, step by step? Then we focus unusually in CS50 on memory itself. And that's an opportunity opened up to us because we are using a language like C, which gives you, for better or for worse, very low-level control over what is going on inside of that computer. And indeed, we introduce students to pointers and memory allocation and the like, and in turn, quite a few seg faults or segmentation faults. But that's among the challenges for students. We introduce students ultimately in this portion of the course to data structures. How can you lay out information more efficiently in memory so as to solve problems ever more effectively and efficiently? And then mid-semester, we begin to transition away from C to a more modern language called Python, very popular in applications of command line programming, web programming, and the like these days. And by way of Python, do we revisit some of the very same programs that students implemented early on in the semester, but we have them re-implement the C code now in Python. But we don't stop there. We then introduce students to principles of web programming, and we introduce them to a bit of SQL and HTML and CSS and JavaScript. And via those that collection of technologies, do students ultimately make user interfaces, and develop applications that are so much more familiar to them today via a web browser or phone than, for instance, the simple black and white window in which we begin the semester by way of terminal windows. And then there are other materials available to you by way of CS50's other courses, but we'll touch on those again in the coming weeks as to other ingredients that you might pull off the shelf and weave into your classroom's environment. But what about now these shorts? So the shorts, again, are shorter form videos filmed by CS50's own Doug Lloyd that focus on specific topics like functions or memory allocation or sorting or searching or any number of other topics as well. And so here is a fairly long list of all of the additional shorts that are available to you as a teacher that either you as a teacher can use to better understand the material yourself, or that you can assign to students in order for them to better understand that material. And the same goes for CS50's lectures as well. You as a teacher can indeed adopt CS50 outright and provide your students with the lectures that I happen to lead here in Sanders and have them watch those lectures early on each week. And then you in your own classroom can certainly use your in-person, your more valuable time with the students physically to actually explore that material in more detail, to answer questions that they might have if I didn't explain something particularly well or they'd like to hear it from another perspective, or most compellingly perhaps to do a lot of hands-on activities together or to even work on the course's problem sets as a group. And the sections to which I allude to here on campus, they're typically led by our teaching fellows or teaching assistants. But beyond Cambridge, those same materials are very often used by teachers, perhaps such as yourselves, because they are simply additional materials that go into more detail on certain topics, provide you with sample programs that you can implement with your students. So one model, too, might be to have students watch CS50's lectures online at some point during the week, and then in person use our section materials in your own classroom to cover that material in more detail at greater depth. Or alternatively, if you'd rather not use CS50's lectures at all, that too is quite fine. You as the teacher are welcome to watch them behind the scenes, if only for reference, or not at all. And then you yourself can present CS50's curriculum and its concepts in your own classroom without ever mentioning or showing to your students these lectures that we film here. It's entirely up to you whether you adopt the class outright or you adapt the class, so to speak, in a way that's more conducive for your students. We make the materials available to you to execute on however you see fit, whether the lectures, the sections, or now the shorts. Now, as for the problem sets and walkthroughs, these are, again, what primarily characterize students' experience in taking CS50, whether it's here at Harvard or anywhere around the world. The problem sets are by design meant to be more project-oriented than typical homework assignments. I personally have never been a fan of the sort of end of chapter in a textbook style problems that are very simplistic and only have students write a few lines of code that really aren't that interesting, even if they help the student better understand the syntax of the language itself. CS50's problem sets, by contrast, are an opportunity for students via Scratch, and then C, and then Python, and then SQL, and then more, to explore real-world problems, to solve problems and implement programs in ways that use principles of computer science, but with effects that hopefully inspire and excite them about the field and its possibilities for themselves. So for instance, although we do start the semester quite quickly with Scratch, we then transition again to C and have students implement, for instance, their own greedy algorithm. For instance, if you walk into a store, you hand someone some amount of money, and they owe you some change, via what algorithm can you figure out the fewest number of coins to give that customer back so that you've minimized just how many coins you're taking out of your cash register and giving to that customer? Cryptography. We introduce this to students very early on, and we have them implement their own ciphers or algorithms for encrypting and decrypting information. We then introduce students to the world of elections, very much in vogue right now in the US as well as in other countries around the world. But we ask students to consider what are the right algorithms for conducting those human elections. It's quite common to just expect a majority vote or perhaps a plurality vote. But there's actually other algorithms, and different algorithms can influence who wins an election. And so we ask students to implement some of these algorithms and explore those disparate algorithms via their own code. We introduce students to the world of forensics and images more generally. We have them recover deleted images from a digital camera's memory card, for instance, and recover some actual JPEGs. We have them implement a number of Instagram-like filters such that they can take a photo of their very own and make it black and white or sepia or invert it or do other transformations just like on Instagram, Snapchat, and the like these days. We then introduce students ultimately to SQL, a language particularly well suited to large data sets, and we have them explore the Internet Movie Database of TV shows and movies and perform queries representative of how they might solve problems with other large data sets in the world. And then towards semester's end, do we additionally focus on the world of web programming and have students implement, for instance, their own stock-like trading website with virtual currency that's such that they can buy and sell stocks by interacting with a real-world API or application programming interface. And there's even more problems that we don't typically offer in a given year of CS50 because there's simply not time. But all of them are available to you, such as those on the list here. As a teacher, if you might want to integrate them into your own class, particularly if you have more in-person class time than a university environment might have day to day. And then when it comes to the courses, quizzes, and tests, these are not part of CS50x that students might take online. We typically use these only on campus, and we provide them to teachers in their own environments, again, because they're meant to go beyond the scope sometimes of CS50, but also be summative assessments that teachers can use to make sure their students are mastering the material. So here's just a list of some of last year's problems, and they introduce students often to current events or other technologies that we don't cover in CS50 itself, but these and more are available to you as teachers, as well as sample solutions, so that if you yourself aren't quite sure what's expected in a problem, you can prepare comfortably for your own classes as well. So all of this is ultimately made available as so-called OpenCourseWare, freely available material that you can download from CS50's website, as well as from other resources we'll provide to you. And again, the theme ultimately is up to you, whether to adopt the class outright or adapt it. So what a particularly new teacher might do initially, if teaching CS50 or computer science for the very first time, is adopt the class. Have their students at the start of the week or the start of a month watch one of CS50's lectures. And then if that teacher is able, in ordinary times, to meet with their students in person in a classroom or other environment, to then walk through that material in more detail, to answer questions that they might have as a result of the material, to do more hands-on activities. And those activities can come from our lecture or those so-called section materials as well. And then you can assign at your pace the course's quizzes and problem sets and tests, or only a subset thereof. Alternatively, if you've been teaching computer science or CS50 for some time and you really just want to be inspired by freely available materials and weave them into your course using literally your own voice and your own pedagogical style, that too is fine. And so that might be said to adapt the class, where students do not need to watch these lectures or any of our shorts or other materials. Perhaps you use those for yourself only or not at all, and you rely on your own classroom time to introduce students to a phone book that you might tear in half in person, or your own students move them around on stage or in front of the classroom so as to practice searching and sorting and other algorithms. So it's a very common paradigm for teachers, maybe initially to adopt CS50, but then eventually adapt it. Once you yourself feel comfortable, have your footing, and decide that you would like to do things differently or better or in a manner more conducive to your students, that too is ultimately fine. So let me give you a sense then of how these materials are made available. And we'll, of course, follow up with more specific URLs and the like beyond what's in these slides here today. So if you're familiar with CS50's OpenCourseWare website, you'll see that many of the pages are formatted a little like this. So for instance, for a typical week of CS50, we make available the lecture itself, which is typically about 2 hours of content taught by me here in Sanders Theater to a room full, in ordinary years, of students in which we introduce students to concepts. Those materials are made available in any number of formats. So audio formats, if you want to download or listen to an MP3 on some device. We have one of our teaching fellows, or TFs, take notes so that our own students and you and your students don't have to be scribbling down everything I say or perhaps you say. We have a canonical set of notes that summarize what was covered in that lecture so that students can especially search it and find material that might be available to them. We also make available the course's slides, not only as one PDF that I use here in Sanders, but also as Google Slides. If you want to just copy or adapt one or more of those slides, you can make a copy of the Google Slides and edit them or translate them into your own spoken language as you see fit. We make available source code. So any of the programs I write here in class, we make available as a big listing or index of all of those files, as well as a zip file, and then even a PDF. In fact, if you've ever watched some of CS50's lectures and you've seen me futz with some papers, those are usually printouts of the code that I intend to write. So sometimes I still screw up, even though I have that printed paper there for me. But it's a handy resource so that you can live code, but fall back on if you're feeling a little stressed or under pressure to figure out what you might have done wrong. And then, of course, the videos. And these videos are made available in different formats and different resolutions and bandwidths. One via CS50's video player, which has a number of features we'll give you a sense of in a bit. MP4s, which is a popular downloadable format for video that you can download in very small files, like 360p, which is a pretty small resolution, a couple hundred megabytes maximally, which is good for students on slow internet connections or intermittent or expensive internet connections, all the way up to MP4s that are 4K resolution that you can even watch on a sofa in front of a TV at home as well. And then, of course, via YouTube are those same videos all accessible too, assuming YouTube itself is not blocked in the country you're in. And then the shorts too. They're made available not only as MP4s, but also via CS50's video player or YouTube as well. Pictured here are just a few sample shorts from this particular week. And then last but not least is the course's problem set. We organize CS50's homework here at Harvard into problem sets, which means one or more problems we assign to students per week or at a time. Elsewhere in the world, when folks have adopted CS50 for their own classroom, they might not assign whole problem sets unless you want to follow our curriculum week by week. Rather, they might take apart a problem set and assign students one problem per week, or maybe one or two. Maybe they'll do some of the problems in class and have their students do it at home. It is entirely up to you. We make all of the individual problems available to you as teachers. What about now software? So I alluded first and foremost to CS50's video player, via which you and students can access the course's content, if not by YouTube or downloadable MP4s. Just to give you a sense, though, of what CS50's own video player does, it adds a few features that are pedagogically motivated. So for instance, here is an awkward screenshot of me in one of CS50's lectures this past year. And if we focus along the top right of the screen, you'll see a menu bar with a few options. The first of those options says here chapters. So what we do is go through each of the lectures, thanks to one of the course's teaching fellows, and decide at what time code, hour and minute and second, I began introducing a particular topic, so that you, the teacher, or they, the students, can jump to specific parts of the lecture, especially if you don't need or want your students watching 2-hour lectures at a time. You only want them to watch small portions of them, or you yourself, only small portions thereof. These chapters can help you navigate the content. We also have captions in English. So these are human transcribed captions, not Google automation. And these captions can also be searched. So for better or for worse, every word that comes out of my mouth is jotted down here as text, so that if you want, as a student or teacher, to find where we discussed binary search, you can start typing binary into the search field, and voila, you'll see every time code at which I mentioned binary in that particular class. There's also keyboard shortcuts, as well as, most recently, a menu of snacks. It has been commented more than once online that it's unfortunate that even though here at Harvard we take breaks roughly in the middle of these lectures and go outside and have snacks, whether it's some cake at the beginning of the semester or some vegetables or fruits later in the semester for health's sake, those are now available in emoji form to anyone who might want to click on those while watching a video as well. Meanwhile, perhaps the most compelling pedagogical feature of CS50's video player is this one here. Of course, if I'm standing in front of a screen on stage, I might look as before like this, such that it's not quite easy for students to see what's on the screen behind me. And so in the top left-hand corner of CS50's video player is a screen toggle that allows them to zoom in on exactly what was on my laptop at that moment in time. And they can stay on that view until they'd like to toggle back to whatever's going on on stage. So collectively, those features, chapters and captions and snacks and screen, compose what is CS50's own video player. As for the programming tools that CS50 students will use, is that known first as CS50 Sandbox. And allow me to disclaim that over the course of this summer and fall, the user interfaces of the tools you're about to see will odds are look a little bit different as they merge into one tool, but the functionality you're about to see will remain available even as the appearance changes. So CS50 Sandbox is meant to be a very simple programming environment that allows students to get started programming quickly. Those of you might know, if you deal with Macs or PCs or computer labs in a classroom environment, it can be a challenge to have the IT team install special software on any of the computers. It's a challenge sometimes for students to download, install, and configure any particular tools for a programming environment. So everything that CS50 does is available for free via web-based technologies, via the so-called cloud. And indeed, CS50 Sandbox is a web-based programming environment that is screenshotted here. You can play if you go to sandbox.cs50.io. If Brian wouldn't mind pasting that into the chat. It requires only a free GitHub account to log in. And CS50 Sandbox, per the checkboxes here, allows you to create a relatively simple programming environment quite quickly. And it will provide students along the top with tabs for their code and along the bottom with an actual terminal window. And this is very much a pedagogical decision of the class. You might be familiar with other environments that allow students to compile and execute code just by clicking a button, like a play button, whether that's an Xcode or Eclipse or NetBeans or the like. We very deliberately, pedagogically, introduce students very early on to an actual terminal window, which, while it might look like a data technology, is incredibly powerful and also very much in use and in vogue in the real world when it comes to programming in any number of languages. And so we don't hide this particular implementation detail from students, but rather, per this screenshot, we have them make or compile their code and then run it without initially the more familiar buttons and windows and tabs and the like. Those come back later in the course. Besides CS50 Sandbox, do we have a tool called CS50 Lab? CS50 Lab is essentially CS50 Sandbox plus integrated instructions for the student. So if you've ever seen a tool like Codecademy or the like, you know that there are these web-based programming environments that have instructions along one side, the programming environment along the other. But generally speaking, those systems are proprietary in the sense that you need to sign up for or pay for or use their particular interface or the like. CS50 Lab is available to teachers simply by having a free GitHub account and by knowing a little bit of Markdown, which is a text-based markup language, even simpler than HTML, and a little bit of YAML, which is a configuration file format. Together with Markdown and YAML, can you actually create your own CS50 Lab? So we have some of our own. We assign those to students and make them available to you as teachers to assign to your own students. But some of our own teachers have on their own created their own repository or folder on GitHub, and they've written up their own homework problems or homework assignments using CS50 Lab. What they ultimately create is an interface that looks a little something like this, where you have something that looks quite like the sandbox along one side, but then you have a fairly user-friendly window of instructions. And that ultimately is HTML, but they're written again in this lightweight format called Markdown, even including images or anything else. So in a nutshell, and in a later session during this workshop this week, we'll provide you with a more hands-on look at how you can create your own CS50 Lab simply by having a GitHub repository to them. We then take care of the process of creating the programming environment, turning the Markdown into HTML, and presenting it to your students. But you ultimately author the content of those labs if you would like. But lastly, when it comes to programming environments, is CS50's most powerful tool called CS50 IDE, built atop another cloud service called Cloud9. CS50 IDE is essentially a set of plugins that are educationally motivated that simplify that real-world web programming environment known as Cloud9. And so, for instance, here is a screenshot of CS50's IDE. It too has tabbed windows where students can write their code, whether it's in C or Python or frankly C++ or Java or other languages are supported as well, even if we don't use them in CS50 itself. Along the bottom, again, is a built-in terminal window that provides students with command line access to their code and commands, and then a file browser along the side where they can also see a graphical user interface to navigate all of the files and folders that they might have. But there are other features as well, including a built-in debugger that allows allows students to navigate their code step by step. It's based on something called GDB, but it doesn't use the command line with purely text output. It's graphical, similar in spirit to Visual Studio or Eclipse or NetBeans or the like. So students can set so-called breakpoints in their code and walk through it step by step by step. The IDE also has collaboration built in. Students can share their workspaces with you, their teacher, so that you can log in and see their code in situ. Or you can even chat textually back and forth with the student if providing them help remotely, especially nowadays if all of us are going to be working from home for some time. If your school doesn't reopen yet, you can collaborate with your students and provide them with guidance interactively. And if you'd like to introduce pair programming to your students, where two students work on a program at the same time, one student can share their IDE with another, and so long as both have GitHub accounts, they can together work on some program and even chat within the IDE itself. There's also revision history built in. So students can certainly use Git or SVN or Mercurial if you're familiar with these version control programs, but they can also just let the IDE automatically save and back up their code. And then with the little slider that they move left to right, they can rewind in time if they want to go back to an earlier version, or if, God forbid, they mess up or delete something, the code will be automatically backed up for them. And so that then is CS50 IDE. And later this week, we'll CS50's own Kareem Zidan, who developed a lot of this functionality, introduce us in more detail to this tool and others. Now, there's a few other tools that are available as part of the toolkit for you that you can use with or without CS50 itself. CS50 Render at render.cs50.io, if Brian wouldn't mind pasting that URL, is a tool that just makes it easy to drag and drop or upload source code in C, in Python, Java, C++, whatever language you teach for any class, and it just turns them into a nice PDF for you, such that it's oriented like this, landscape mode. It's syntax highlighted in color. So again, if you've ever seen me with some papers off to the side in CS50 itself, I'm usually looking at code that I've printed out for myself in advance. However, years ago, we used to use these same PDFs to provide comments on students' work. So we'll talk later this week, too, about assessments. And with some of CS50's own teachers around the world, will we introduce you to some workflows that you yourself could consider adopting to provide students with feedback on their code. We have tools like Check 50 and Style 50, more on those later this week, via which your students can get automated feedback on their code. But if you'd like to also critique and provide students with feedback on the design of their programs, you can use something as simple as PDFs, and then use Acrobat or Apple Preview or any other tool to type human comments on their code as well, in hopes of helping them write better code. And you can even line up code side by side if you want to compare, for instance, the C version of something to the Python version or the like. But lastly, does CS50 have this tradition of community events here on campus as well as around the world? So each year at the very start of the semester, do we begin CS50 itself with CS50 Puzzle Day. And this is an opportunity for students on campus who are taking or maybe not even taking CS50 to gather here on a Saturday afternoon for a few hours with some pizza and literally a printed packet of puzzles. None of those puzzles require prior CS experience or any programming experience. Students can bring laptops, but they won't be writing any code, but they might use Google or other resources to help figure out clues. And these puzzles ultimately are all about problem solving. And we very deliberately educationally start the semester with CS50 Puzzle Day so that students have an opportunity to realize that computer science is not about programming at the end of the day. It's absolutely a useful and powerful tool that is very often learned along the way when studying computer science, but it's not necessarily an end unto itself. Rather, it's a tool one uses to solve problems more generally. And so CS50 Puzzle Day challenges students on small teams to get together and really for fun, competitively, try to solve more puzzles more quickly than other teams of classmates that might have been formed. And we often take photographs or video footage of these events just to share in the memories with future students. And indeed, just a few photos from years past might be these here of our own CS50 Puzzle Day around the world. So we have for many years now made these same puzzles available to teachers like yourself and student groups around the world so that they can organize their own puzzle days in person, in school, in cafes, in libraries, at home, or nowadays especially online via Zoom or Skype or some similar technology. And so here are just a few of the smiling faces either before or after having solved a whole lot of puzzles from folks around the world who kindly took these photographs after forming their own local communities and getting together for some afternoon or evening of puzzle solving on their own. This past spring, you might recall that we organized CS50x Puzzle Day online. But if and when you're able to reunite with your students in person, you can certainly do this in person, or perhaps in the coming months, you can do this online as well. We'll follow up and provide you with the packet of puzzles if you'd like to hold it locally somehow in some form. Now, the CS50 Hackathon is another tradition of ours that we've been doing for quite a few years now. And it's meant to be an opportunity for students to have, in our case, an incredibly immersive and hopefully memorable academic experience focused on the creation of their final project. In addition to CS50's problem sets, the course culminates in a capstone of sorts, a final project. And a final project is essentially a piece of software, maybe a web application, a command line tool, a Chrome extension, a mobile application that students design and implement on their own. I and the course's teaching fellows provide students with feedback, and we help them calibrate their project so that it's not too easy and it's not too hard, it's not too little work, it's not too much work, but ultimately students implement the final project themselves without a specification or problem set from us. And the hackathon is an opportunity toward the end of our school year where we get together, in our case at 7 p.m. in the evening, and we go until 7 a.m. in the morning, 12 hours of working collaboratively with classmates alongside you on some project of meaning to you. Now, that's not appealing for everyone to get together at 7 p.m. at night and keep working till 7 a.m. in the morning. And so we've adapted this event all over. And indeed, at the middle school or high school level, we've often encouraged folks or visited folks hosting these events more in the morning or in the afternoon. You, of course, in your own locale can implement this vision however you see fit. And here, too, we have some photographs from CS50x communities around the world that have held their own CS50x puzzle days and also CS50 hackathons focused either on these final projects or, if they so choose, focused as well on simply problem sets. So especially if you want to hold events like this mid-year, you can instead use CS50's hackathon to simply bring students together on some afternoon or morning or evening or weekend to focus on one or more problems that they've been assigned. Taking photographs and photo booths and the like are part of the tradition as well. And so those are just a few of the photos you've seen there. And then last but certainly not least is truly the capstone experience for students in the class, the so-called CS50 Fair. This is an event born of really our own experience some years ago, where at the end of CS50 itself here at Harvard, we used to break the students up into small groups, their sections, so to speak. And each of the students in those sections, working either on their own on a final project or with one or two other classmates, would present their final projects in a small classroom to their teaching fellow and maybe 10 or 20 other classmates. And it was an opportunity for them to present their projects, see what everyone else did. But it wasn't a particularly exciting or inspiring environment. And really, everyone was generally going through the motions. It was something you had to do at the end of the day. And it really wasn't an opportunity to celebrate what it is everyone had accomplished. And so the CS50 Fair, by contrast now, is an end-of-year event that we hold here at Harvard, we hold in New Haven at Yale, and we encourage teachers around the world to hold online or on campus as well for their own students. And it's an opportunity for the students to bring their laptops or desktops or borrow one in the same, to stand it up on a desk like this, and then invite the rest of the school. Invite other students not taking CS50. Invite teachers. Invite staff. Invite tourists, here in our case in Harvard Square, to just drop by and chat up students and delight in what it is they have built and what it is they have accomplished. So we often play music in the background. We invite friends from industry. There's usually popcorn and candy and the like. And the CS50 Fair ultimately truly is an opportunity for students to gather around each other's computers and look at what they've created and accomplished on their screens here. And we've encouraged teachers around the world to do these in their own classrooms, in their own communities, as well as in these cases to send us some photographs as well after. And indeed, this was not obvious to me years ago when I started teaching. And we only have these photographs because one of our own teaching fellows 10 plus years ago happened to be taking photos at one of our very CS50 fairs, when it occurred to me, wow, we should actually be systematically remembering to capture these kinds of moments and memories so that, one, students have little mementos or souvenirs from an otherwise purely educational experience, but one that is now all the more community and collectively oriented, But two, having all of these photos and videos, as you might have seen from CS50's own social media pages, is a wonderful way to recruit other students and to pique their curiosity as to what their classmates have done, especially since here at Harvard, 2/3, 66+% of our students have never taken a CS course before. And indeed, there are many more students out there who have never studied CS than who have studied computer science. And so these photographs, these videos, these events, these memories are a wonderful opportunity, especially if you're a teacher, the only teacher teaching computer science, trying to build up and start a computer science program. Just capturing these memories, if your students and their parents perhaps are comfortable with such, is a wonderful way of reaching the eyes and ears of students who might not even consider themselves computer persons until they're encouraged and invited to join you and their classmates. So for you as teachers, as well as for all of CS50's online students, we do have any number of these online communities. We have generally avoided creating a walled garden, so to speak, that for which you have to sign up for CS50. And we've instead tried to bring the course to all different communities and platforms out there. And so this is most of CS50's online communities here. Again, via the chat window, if Brian, you wouldn't mind repasting the link of these slides for anyone who recently joined. All of these are clickable, and you can visit them yourself to turn to others, either for questions about material or even advice of other educators for tips and tricks from fellow teachers. And then what else is available? So you might know, too, at the end of the semester, we provide students with an opportunity to receive a CS50 certificate. And the CS50 certificate proclaims that they have successfully completed something like CS50x or one of CS50's other classes. What that tool also has the ability to do, if you so choose, is if you are a teacher at a specific school or community or student group or the like, and you would like to customize these certificates for your own community, we're happy to facilitate that as well. So at the end of your school year, if you reach out to us and provided your students have indeed met the expectations for the course's certificates and you'd like us to customize it with an explicit mention of your city or country or school or the like, we're happy to do that for teachers as well, so that you yourself can present them, perhaps printed out on paper when we're all back in person, to your students in person in recognition of their accomplishments. So how to find out more support and stay in touch with each other and us, we'll follow up via email with links to all of these resources too. But moving forward, there's an email list that you'll be able to sign up for. We'll send you an invitation to teachers@lists.cs50.harvard.edu. And this will be a list where you can just ask questions of fellow teachers. We have a separate list for students, but the teacher list is meant to be about advice or ideas or inspiration for your own classes, confusion that you might want to ask of fellow teachers, but not necessarily of other students. And so realize this is one resource available to you. Allow me to say yet again how nice it's been to connect with so many people here today around the world. If you happen to tune in late today and would like to catch this session again, we'll do so again at 10 p.m. Eastern time this evening. Tomorrow, we focus all the more on some of CS50's tools, and CS50's own Kareem Zidan, himself a former student from Egypt who's now with us here at Harvard full-time working on CS50 IDE and other software projects, will lead teachers in a more hands-on demonstration of several of these tools. And then later in the week, will Brian go into more depth on grading and assessment, and as will some of our other teachers as well. In the meantime, we'll follow up late today or tomorrow with an email with the links to the slides and more. But so nice to see everyone again. If you'd like to perhaps wave goodbye to everyone else here on the screen, we're looking forward to seeing everyone again tomorrow and the days that follow. This was CS50.